In lieu of another song, I'll talk about Gregorian chants. No, it just made me think of this church that we were in once as we were in evangelism, that they were kind of liturgical, and the pastor got up and he started, or actually the assistant pastor said, "I'm the assistant pastor. I make $20,000 a year. It's not enough." Then the senior pastor got up and he said, "I'm the senior pastor. I make $35,000 a year. It's not enough." And the evangelist, he thought, well, I'll get into this too. So he got up and said, "I'm the evangelist. I make $45,000 a year. It's not enough." And then the music evangelist with all his tapes and CDs in the back got up and said, "I'm the music evangelist. I make $95,000 a year, and there's no business like show business." Sorry. Really doesn't have to do anything, but... Anyway, tonight we're going to take the rest of the service and talk about a mission trip that we took to Texas. Before we start, anyone in here that went with us, could you just stand real quick? We took 8 students. We took 1 high school teacher, 1 pastor, and then 5 adult men that went with us. So these are some of the people that went with. Thanks, guys, for coming. All right, have a seat there. And went all the way down to San Angelo, Texas, where Jeff Waller, our missionary, is ministering to children. And there we had an opportunity to minister with him. And without saying any more, because I don't want to take any of their testimonies, I'm going to let Holly come up and give her testimony, and then Chad, and then Ryan Brown.
Good evening. Okay, so at first, when I was thinking about going to Texas, I'm like, should I do this? I'm not quite sure about that. But then I read in Jeremiah 1:7, it says, "You must go to everyone, and I send you to and say whatever I command you to." So I'm like, well, yeah, I have to do whatever God says, what he tells me to do. So first began the long bus ride over to Texas, and I was really kind of scared. I'm like, oh, I don't like long car trips. I'm gonna die. I'm just gonna, I don't know. I'm not gonna be able to do it because I'm like ADHD, but God blessed me with patience for that. And so we had a lot of fun together. At first I was nervous because I was like, I hardly know anyone that's going. Should I be going? But that ended up being really fun, and I made a lot of new friends. We first started out painting, which was a lot of fun. It was a little scary once we got up on the lift. It was a tense situation. And because the lift would start shaking back and forth a bit when you got up to the very top. So I was like, oh, this is a little scary. But it was a lot of fun. We were able to help them out in a lot of ways. And then we also had to brush off their kind of driveway to help get it ready. So that was a lot of fun too. We had a lot of fun by listening to music and praising the Lord while we were painting. And the kids would come after school, and we'd play with them and kind of talk to them a bit. And you could tell that they really liked that, and they really enjoyed having us. And on the second day, I was able to lead 6 kids to Christ by just reading out of my Bible. I've got a really cool story to tell you, and they were really ecstatic about it, which was really cool. And on the third day, I was able to lead 3 more kids to Christ after Mel preached to them. And one of the girls told me while we were driving, she's like, "My daddy lives in a jail over there." And I'm like, oh my goodness, that's so sad. And many other kids had really heartbreaking stories like that too. And I was like, we are so blessed where we are and for what we have. And another blessing that I had at the end of the trip is that they said that I might be able to go back during this summer and help them, which would be a lot of fun because I really enjoyed it. And thank you.
All right, so this was not my first year. I think this was my second year going out, and I really love the trip. I love working with kids and stuff, and these kids are some of the cutest kids, and not only that, but they've got a hunger for the gospel too, because they don't have a lot of comforts down there. I don't know. Most of them are from broken families and stuff, so it's nice to see them wanting to hear the gospel, And usually, God teaches me something every year, and I was thinking this year, oh, it's gonna have to do with the kids, So let's get working with the kids and stuff. And I mean, that was fun too. But what he really taught me this year was about the church. So on Sunday morning, we went to Jeff's church, and it was sweet. It was my kind of church, you know. It was huge. They had a ton of people. They had a really cool stage, and they had like lights and fog machines and like everything, you know, full band, and we're all like praising God, like worshiping him like through the songs, and I was having a blast there. And I thought, you know, that's how it's done. It's because we have all this cool music. It's because we have the fog machines that everybody wants to sing really loud and stuff. And so that afternoon, Jeff took us to a completely different church. Like, it was the other side of the spectrum. It was like maybe the size of one of these sections right here, and it was like in a nice small building. Like, I would have thought it was a house if I hadn't seen the steeple there, because it was so small. And we walk in, and it's just like old style, you know, little piano, and they're all singing. Like, we come in and they start singing hymns to start off, you know. And I was really surprised. Like, the people there were just as into the worship as the people were that morning at the church we went to. And I was just like blown away. I was like, well, it's so much different. I mean, they don't have the fog machines. I mean, maybe this is their favorite type of music or something, you know. And it really hit me, like, God's like, no, it's not about that. It's not about the fancy stuff that you have. It's about me. Like, it's not about your favorite songs. It's not even about like how you're singing and stuff. It's about me and like worshiping me. And so that was what he taught me this year, and that's all I got. So thanks.
And that was Chad, my son, and then Holly and Ryan Brown. We're going to ask him to come up, and there he is, share with us.
All right. Well, this was a two-purpose trip. Ralph Poland had come to the missions committee and asked about a group of men going down to help with Jeff with lights. And after a time went by and we got through the missions program, Jack Archibald asked me to try to help coordinate and promote that on behalf of the missions committee, and Ralph's request, which came from Jeff's request, picking up our bags that we make each Christmas. But that was even a year earlier. So a year and a half in the request to delivering the goods. My job was to help facilitate that, and we came up with some creative travel and creative scheduling to help people get down or get back and other things. So I was able to drive Joe Hodge and Sam Waller down, left about an hour after the pageant Sunday night, and when I finished my role there, and still had makeup on and some other stuff that wiped off, and got on my Sanhedrin clothes. I didn't want to scare the Texans too much, but Sam and Joe and I had a great time driving through the night. We'd asked for prayer, and we just kept saying, well, it must be working. We couldn't even take turns sleeping. We're pumped to get down there, and got down there about noon on Monday. And then we did try to catch a little bit of rest and sleep a little extra. Again, Ralph and Mark Blaine were already down there working on the lights. They'd already done the gym lights by the time we got down on Monday, because they had arrived on Friday and were able to work some Saturday and Monday morning. I've got a few slides to help. My purpose was kind of like the Widener's purpose going to Bangladesh, but on a much smaller scale. I wanted to see the mission field that Jeff's on. I wanted to learn about what he's doing so that maybe we can partner in a better way in the future. Get out of my culture into their culture, which was part of the purpose of missions. As you can see, let me see if I can figure out my technology here. Way up here, north of the Goodyear proving grounds where they test tires. There's a big plot of land here, so you can find that on Google Earth. Right above that is a little piece of land where Jeff's house and the Gospel Ranch exist, and that's where everybody stayed. And then down through San Angelo, which is about the size of Bloomington Normal, I think. Way down here in the city is basically where the gymnasium building is, where the youth painted and we put in new lights, but they also minister to the children as part of kind of an after-school club 2 days a week, or sometimes 3 days a week. But then up at the Gospel Ranch is where the kids can come in the summer. And again, Jeff would describe it, he said, this is the camp for kids that can't afford to go to camp. So we don't have a lot of luxuries here, but it's what we've got. So again, looking at it from overhead, Jeff's house and a bathhouse out back and some little tiny buildings. Let me zoom in on that a little bit. Basically, we stayed in this box, and Mel kept the temperature at 60 degrees through the night, even though it wasn't that warm yet. But a couple other little dorm buildings where the kids can stay. Back here, again, is the bathhouse, shower house. So when you get up in the middle of the night, you go through the dirt path back to there. There's also just mesquite trees and cacti. That's it. Those are your two choices. No hickory, no oak, no maple, mesquite and cacti. And this is Jeff's house where he raised his 6 children. And he has 3 or 4 vans, and again, through some other gracious ways that God has blessed his ministry, even a bus and now an RV that Joe and Sam got to stay in the RV, so they didn't freeze to death. But somebody donated an old RV to Jeff's ministry as well. This is the kids who come to Gospel Ranch later this summer. This is their outdoor building, and it is outdoors. And if there's a prayer request for future development, it'd be for us to go down and help build him an all-purpose building that would maybe have a concrete floor and some walls where they could get in out of the elements a little bit in the heat. So that's for future reference. And what if your yard looked like that? You wouldn't have a lot of mowing to do, but you couldn't build a treehouse in it either. Inside the refrigerator, I like to froze to death. I go to Texas to freeze, but and then again, though, just thinking about even if you have just a square of desert space to live on, and I don't remember all of Jeff's testimony of how he came to own that chunk of land, but where do you get your gas? Where do you get your water? It's going to be different conditions than what we have here. So that's part of missions. But you can see a lot of stars. There's the sky's wide open, and got one sunset picture. Okay, let me take you downtown San Angelo to an area where, again, small homes. There's no 3-car garages in that part of town. Again, a lot of children from state-supported homes come out to the gymnasium for after-school clubs to learn about the Bible, and as the youth shared, some of them are from broken homes and prison homes. Zooming in on this a little bit, Jeff started in a little building right here, and then outgrew that and built a larger building across the street where there's office, but they still rent this one out to another group that has a worship service in there on Sunday mornings and Wednesday night, but even that group now has outgrown that and are starting to have their Sunday worship in the big building, but still Wednesday night in the smaller building. So Jeff's ministry has been blessed in that sense, and I'll tell you more about some of that in a minute. Again, the building that needed some new lights, some halogen lights were there, very expensive to operate, very noisy, and way up high. Now they have some new energy-efficient light fixtures that will help him save on energy costs, and a lot like what we did here. And Ralph Poland deserves most of the thanks for arranging to get those, take those down, and help get those installed. And the youth painted the blue around the walls. And then in the smaller building across the way, again, the other group uses that building. And just again, some poor light fixtures are very energy hogs and 8-foot light bulbs that you can't buy anymore. So Jeff had gone out and bought some more light fixtures for us to do there. And I think hopefully there was some money left over from what we raised to be able to help pay for some of those as well. So again, I close with that slide again just to remind us of future opportunities to maybe help him grow his ministry there a little bit more. Let me just share a few other thoughts with you that I jotted down this afternoon. It's in terms of what I got out of the trip. Again, I made a beeline down there. I skipped my duties at ISU for a couple days and with permission, And I drove back actually Tuesday night halfway and the rest of the way Wednesday, and got back in the classroom on Thursday. But the story is so much bigger than that. The story includes a lot of things happening leading up to this trip. Just meeting Sam Waller last fall, I realized, man, he owns 400 acres of woods and farmland right next door to where I mushroom hunt every year. And I've been stopping at the bottom of his hill for 20 years saying, I wonder who owns that hill. So I'd like to go up that hill every now and then. And so just, again, just because Ralph came to the committee, now I know Sam Waller, know Joe better, he's in my ABF, but I know Joe better, but know Jeff better. I know his heart. I had a chance to talk with him about how he made it to where he is. I even found out that the Towanda church that Noel pastored at one point, he now pastors in Hudson, but there was a little church in Towanda that as it folded and they had some resources, that they were able to bless Jeff's ministry by donating a lot of money to help build that gym. And then that circles back to, and that little Towanda church is where Stan Alcutt went, who was the person that got me involved in CEF. Does it give you an idea what heaven might be like? It's where, oh, you're the one that did that. You're the one that did that. And then, at the last minute, Lowell Hoffman was buying a car from a guy in Congerville who goes to the Rock Creek Bible Church. He said, hey, I'd like to go on that. So I run over and spend a couple hours with him and get him all lined up to go. And as it turned out, he couldn't go. But he says, I've got some other guys that might want to go too. Hey, they know Jeff's brother that's pastor over at the Eureka Bible Church. And again, relationships, people building, all because Ralph came to our group and said, hey, would you help me with a mission trip? And I'm going to go speak with the Rock Creek Missions Committee and help them know how they can do CEF trips or maybe partner with Jeff's ministry as well in the future. So another relationship built, even though Larry and some friends weren't able to go. In closing, I just want to, I guess the thing that hit me the most in my travel time down there and back is, and even the time I was there, is this thing I've started calling geographic superiority complex. I grew up in the hills of Indiana as a little kid, gravel roads, outhouses, and even though I love the forest there, I probably, could I go back there? Or then I moved to Kentucky as a teenager, and my mother still lives there, and I go back to visit her, and I think, boy, I sure like Normal a lot better than I like this spot in Kentucky. Or I get to here, and I say, boy, could I live with just dust and dirt and no forest, because I grew up in the forest. So part of what I was dealing with all this is, what if God called me to a geographic location that I don't like? Doesn't bother Jeff. His dad's farm is beautiful. Woods, deer hunting, pond fishing. A lot of you have benefited from that. And here Jeff is down here in the middle of the desert. Well, dangerous thinking to think about where you live. You don't want to move away to do missions. I thought of that passage where Philip, they were doing great work in Samaria, and even that was probably a weird thing for the new Christians. The Lord was blessing in Samaria, but an angel of the Lord spoke to Philip, saying, get up and go south to the road that descends from Jerusalem to Gaza. This is a desert road. So he got up and went.
Thanks, Ryan. So glad that you guys got to be able to go. It was a neat trip. Talking about how Jeff lives. 3 years ago, I think the first trip went. I wasn't able to go. My wife went, and she came back, and she was so impressed with how the teens that went on that trip took an interest in Jeff and how he lived. They came back and they were saying that here's Jeff who lives in nothing. The house that he lives in, they bought at another location. He moved it kind of a farm way, the best they could for $1,500. I think he spent, did he say $17,000 for this house? And that's what he lives in, and that's what he raised 6 kids in. He has a ranch there, which is 10 acres, I believe, and he has some buildings that he's built. And in my defense, that building, when we went into to sleep, it was very hot when we got in there, so Jeff turned on the air conditioner and said, this thing might get away from you. And boy, the first night I laid on the top bunk right next to it because I like to have a fan on my face, but it would kick on and this side of my face would freeze, and so I'd roll over and then it would kick off and this side would get hot, and then, forget it. I just couldn't get that thing figured out, and it would always be cold in the morning. But anyway, it's just very humble situation that he's in, and he has kids come out for camp who can't afford to go to camp. We work on our kids to save their money or have their parents save up so they can spend $200 and go to camp, and that's awesome. But these are kids who can't afford $10 to go to camp. So he just goes in and picks them up and brings them out there, and he has a tent set up for them, and he's got some cabins that some churches have built and helped him with, and he has camp for these kids after school. That's what his rec center is for there. Ryan showed you those buildings. That's where all his money is in the camp and in the rec center there for the kids. He doesn't spend any of it on his own. He spends it for the kids, and it was so neat that our teenagers noticed that even the first time we went down. But I wanted to share a couple of things on the trip. It was just really neat. I didn't think I was going to be able to go this year, but towards the last minute they needed another CDL driver, and so I did get to go with them. But here we are taking 8 teenagers and then a bunch of old guys. Can I say that? Old guys? Joe, is that okay? Yeah, okay, all right. Yeah, he'll admit it sometimes. But we're going down on this mission trip together, and a couple of them, Ralph Poland and Mark Blaine, came down with us, but then Joe and Sam, which I don't know if you noticed in the picture there. Did you see all the guys working and Sam supervising? I'm not saying that's the way Sam is, but that's the way Sam is. But it was so neat because here we have these teenagers and here we have these older men, and they really hit it off together. They spent time together. The old guys teasing the kids. Michaela, you can probably remember some of that. Just really kind of messing with them, and yet the kids enjoying that and get to know them. And I heard from both sides. I heard several teenagers saying, "Man, it's really cool to have those guys with us. They really worked hard. They switched out those lights and they did all this. It was really neat to see that." And then I would hear some of the older men saying, "I'm really impressed with those teenagers. They really worked hard." And then when those kids came in, they were so good with those kids. And it so ended up, we had 2 mission trips, but putting them together made a real impact on everybody. And so it was really neat. Well, we drove down that Friday and spent a lot of time on the bus and a lot of time on the bus on the way back. But sometimes I know growing up as a kid, that was some of my favorite parts of our trips, our camping trips and whatnot, was all that time you spent in the bus, because you can't get away from each other. You got to get to know each other. And so they have some good stories from that. We got down there, got to know the Wallers, saw the ministry, and then they started working. One of the first things they did was, you may have seen, they were stuffing these little baggies with a track and with a couple of things of bubble gum. And while the teenagers were doing that, they were playing some Christian songs and just really fellowshipping together. I think they stuffed probably either 500 or up to 1,000 of those things, those little track packets that Jeff will give out to some kids, and they may get to know the Lord through that. We spent time together as a group, just having fun. I mean, we weren't called to be Sadducees, okay? We're called to go out and teach all nations and baptizing them and so forth, but we don't have to be sad all the time. It is good to sacrifice for the Lord, but it's also good to have some good times. So in the evenings, we'd get together. The guys would cook out. The kids would play games and stuff like that, and that's where we got to know each other, like Lance. Lance over there, I went on another mission trip with Lance in the fall, but we were sitting around playing games, and Lance was trying to read his card and apples to apples, and he looks down and read it too fast, and he said, puddles. And Chad looked over his shoulder and said, poodles. Poodles. So the rest of the trip, the rest of our mission excursion, Lance was known as Puddles. So we have some really neat memories that way. It was probably one of the best tasting mission trips that I've been on because the older guys donated a lot, and they bought steaks one night, and they bought breakfast here and there and whatnot, and it was just a really neat opportunity for us to be together. The guys got in there and they put in the lights in the gym. I think 2/3 of them they put in on the first day. They were just going to it. And then the next thing you know, all the lights are in. And then they move over to the lights in the annex building. And when the other guys got down, and they got all those lights put in. But I'll never forget, I think it was Monday, they started to coat the parking lot, seal the parking lot. Jeff went out and bought several $100s worth of materials. He said, well, I got the labor here. Let's go out and let's seal the parking lot, what we have there. So they started to seal it, and they got a patch done about as big as this part of the platform right here. And I think it took them a couple hours. I mean, I'm not talking about how slow they are, but no, they did a good job. But it was tough work. While they were out there, a guy drove up in his work truck, and he got out, and he knew Jeff from before, and he walked up to Jeff, and he said, what you guys doing? He said, well, we're sealing the parking lot. He said, tell them to stop. And Jeff said, okay, stop. He said, no, he owns a company that does that type of work. He said, God's been good to me this year. I want to be good back to him by helping you. So tomorrow morning, I'll have my guys here at 10 o'clock. And we'll seal the parking lot. And sure enough, the next morning, and we came back to make sure he was there by 10, which he was early, but he came in with his guys, and of course they had the professional equipment. They blew off all the dust. Then they came through with their truck, and probably about 45 minutes, they sprayed that whole parking lot down and did that. Now, what was going to cost Jeff several hundreds of dollars, he was able to return his materials, and it cost him nothing to complete that whole parking lot. I thought, how far do these guys go? Can they come up and do my driveway while they're at it? But it was so neat to be able to see God do something like that, to see God supply in a situation like that. Last year when we were down there, Jeff was getting ready for his trip to Pakistan, and he was short some money. He wanted to go over there and help, and they ended up helping to build a church building over there in Pakistan for the missionary that's ministering to children over there. But before we got to his place, he needed another $2,000. And so when we got there, we started praying with him, and it was so neat because by the time we left, he had brought in, or God had brought in $2,000 that he needed for that trip, plus extras. And we had the opportunity to be there and actually witness that. We didn't read it in a missionary book. We didn't read it in a story about missionaries. We lived it with him. And that's the beauty that's part of the beauty of going on a mission trip to work with one of our missionaries, is to see how God uses them. Well, the kids, as Holly talked about, painted, and then she talked about painting on a lift. I don't know if you explained that well enough for them to understand, Holly, but I explained it this way because I work with kids. We had an electric lift where we painted all the 8-foot stuff, but then to get higher, we would get on this big, huge contraption, and we'd go up and we'd paint, come down, we paint. And so we got 25 feet in the air at one point. And if you ever have to do something like that on a mission trip, don't ask Holly to help you. She does a great job, but she moves around a lot, and that thing was going back and forth. And I'm not afraid of heights, I'm just afraid of Holly. But we did have a good time switching off on helping do that. And then it was really neat to see what we were working for, because on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday afternoons, the kids came in after school, and anywhere from 20 to 40 kids would come in on a given day, and they would spend 2.5 hours over at Jeff's place. They spend the first hour and a half playing games, being in the gym. While they did that, there were 2 memory verses that were posted on the wall. And if they said their memory verse to one of the helpers, then they got $1. Now, it wasn't a real dollar. I call it a Waller dollar. And it was just a little dollar thing that he printed up. They could take that to the snack shop where he had treats, and they could get a treat with their Waller dollar. So if you said 2 verses, you get 2 Waller dollars. Are you with me on the math? Okay, so if you got 2 Waller dollars, you could get 2 snacks. Well, I always want to know what's their favorite snack. So last year I asked them, what is your favorite snack? And the consensus from all the kids were Flamin' Hot Cheetos. Well, that makes sense. They're in Texas, they like Tex-Mex stuff. They like Flamin' Hot Cheetos. This year they surprised me. I said, what is your favorite treat here? They said, well, first you get the Flamin' Hot Cheetos. Okay, well, yeah, I could see that coming. But then they said, and I noticed last year, some of them like to get those. Jeff just had a big jar of pickles. Not the little pickles, but the big pickles. Well, this year they came up with a new contraption where you buy a Flamin' Hot bag of Cheetos, then you buy a frozen pickle. You cut off the top of the frozen pickle, or chew it off or whatever. You stick your Flamin' Hot Cheeto down in the pickle, and then you eat it with pickle juice. And I said, you guys are just weird. There's just no getting around it. I mean, you buy Flamin' Hot Pickle Cheetos with your Waller dollars. It's a foreign mission field. It really is. But it was so neat to see our kids really getting to know their kids and really spending time with them and playing with them, and they have neat little names. That last year we came and there was a set of twins, and they were, I think, 3 or 4 last year. This year they're 4 or 5. And when they came in, you could see why they called them this. One of them's name was Flacco, and the other one was, what was it? Fabian. Yeah, but that's not what they called him. They called him, Flacco, but the one kid was called Fat Boy. And that's what he was. They're twins, but one was skinny and one was heavier. He's 3, okay? He's not self-conscious about it yet or anything. But this year, they looked almost exactly alike, but they still loved being called their nicknames. And so we got to know the kids. We got to be able to build a rapport with them. And then as Holly was saying, on one of the days, she sat down with some of the kids and started reading and telling a story from the Bible. And before you know it, six kids asked Jesus into their heart. And then by the end of the week, we had 12 kids who made a profession of faith for the Lord there. And I know we hesitate and we think, well, they're just kids. Did they really get it? That reminds me of what D.L. Moody said once. We had 2.5 people saved tonight. 2 kids and 1 adult. Childlike faith is something. And it was so neat to see. There was one kid I remember especially. His name was Al. And I thought he had been there before many times, but as I was doing a gospel magic trick with a picture of Jesus, that I explained the gospel and how he died for us and rose again, I used Al as an illustration. After I actually tear up the picture of Jesus, but I talk about how they beat Jesus and how they hit him with a cat of 9 tails and how they nailed him to the cross and how he died. And then I put him into a bag and this picture that's all torn up. And then 3 days later, well, there's a time lapse I use. Okay, I don't wait 3 days. But I talk about 3 days later, they look in the bag and there's nothing in there except one of the pieces of the picture that says he is risen. And I said after 3 days they went to the tomb and Jesus was no longer there, and the angel said he is not here, for he is risen. And then I pick up the picture frame and it has the picture of Jesus back into the frame there, still torn up, because I say Jesus still has scars in his hands and in his feet, not because he doesn't know how to heal scars, but to remind us how much that he loves us. And then I use an illustration of one of the kids in there, and I say, let's say that Al is my best buddy, and I'm coming over and I talk about how I'm going to go to his house, and he lies to his parents. It's all a story. And his parents are going to spank him, and his dad, I make up his dad is a huge bodybuilder, and he's just going to really spank him hard. But I come over to visit, and I say, you know what? Al is He is my best buddy, and I feel bad that, you know what, can I just take his punishment? And his parents say, sure, go ahead. And so I walk up to Al's room, and they say, you have to ask Al, though. And I say, Al, can I take your spanking? And of course he goes, yeah, you're crazy. I don't know what's going on. And then I talk about how I come down and his dad spanks me, and I'll feel it for about 4 months. But then I say, when Al comes downstairs, does he have to be spanked? And every kid shakes their head, no. Why not? Because you took his spanking. And I say, that's what Jesus did for you. Little did I know that was the first time Al was at the center. And afterwards, Al raised his hand that he wanted to get saved, but he didn't get up and walk out with the other kids. He waited until everything was done, and then he caught me off to the side by himself, and he said, how can I know that I'm on my way to heaven? And so I knelt down with that probably fourth or fifth grade boy, and showed him how he could pray and ask Jesus for forgiveness of his sins. And that is one of the greatest reasons that we go on mission trips. That is the reason that we exist, so we can share that with people that are around us. I know in the missions committee we've talked about how we can promote missions and how we can keep people mission-minded. And one of the things is we would like to see more of us go on mission trips. The Wideners went on a 6-week mission trip. You may not be able to do that, but just to go and visit our missionaries, to see what they do, and then be a liaison for them. Be a liaison back to the church so that we can remember what they're doing and remind us what they're doing. And they can have somebody in the church that knows them and that can relate to them and can relate to others what they're going through. The coolest part about that is not that you get to visit a foreign country. For some of us, that's really cool. Traveling is a neat opportunity. The coolest thing is that you get to see God working in their lives. You get to see faith being lived out. I'm almost out of time, but Philippians chapter 4 is what I wanted to show you tonight, just briefly. In Philippians chapter 4, we have probably a majority, this is probably the most concentrated chapter of verses that we have memorized that we use in totally different situations. We'll take this verse and we'll say that's good for this verse, but they're all in the same passage and they all work together. In Philippians 4, the first verse that jumps out at me is Philippians 4:4. Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. We use that all the time. We might have memorized verse 5. Let your moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand. Be careful for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. We'll take that verse and build a whole sermon on praying and the different ways to pray. Verse 7, we'll pull this out by itself. And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. That's a great promise even of itself. Then we look down at verse 11 that says, not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. Maybe you've used 4:13 more than once. As a matter of fact, I have it on my ring right here that my brother gave me a couple years ago. I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. Standalone verse? Absolutely. But it's in a whole passage of verses. And then verse 19, but my God shall supply all your need according to his riches in glory by Christ Jesus. All these verses that we use in different situations could be completely different scenarios that we use them in, but they all fit together. I think Philippians chapter 4, Paul is talking to the Philippians and he's saying, this is how you can keep your joy. This is what faith is. Now we know Hebrews has a whole chapter about faith and about heroes of the faith, but this is how you can keep your faith if you put all this together. Well, what is God saying through this passage? Well, he starts off with Verse 4, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. Now, if you're a parent, you know that if you have something to emphasize, you say it more than once. If you have a 4-year-old, you say it at least 3 times. Sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down. Why do you do that? Because that's what's important. You may say all kinds of other stuff. Now I made you peas, and I made you carrots, and I made you a little bit of ham. Don't throw it, don't throw it, don't throw it on the floor. That's because it's important. You re-emphasize it. And I think that's what God is doing. He's saying, rejoice in the Lord always. And again I say, rejoice. Rejoice. I think it's important to God that we are able to be joyful. Now, does that mean that God's a prosperity God, and the closer you get to God and the more your relationship with Him develops, the easier life is going to be because He'll give you everything that you want? And I used to think that growing up, that if I could just attain to the level of my pastor, then everything will be just fine and nothing will go wrong. But Pastor had a heart attack a couple years ago, and that was tough for him to go through. That's not how it works. How it works is the more you build a relationship with God, the more you can handle when things go bad, and the easier it is for you to be joyful even when things are going tough. But I think the first thing he tells us here is, if I could summarize it in a phrase that probably dates me, but I think verse 4 could be translated, don't worry, be happy. Some of you remember that from recent days, not so recent days. Don't worry, be happy. Rejoice. You can have joy no matter what's going on. Well, that's why verse 6 adds in, which we usually use off by itself, be careful for nothing. In other words, don't worry. But in everything, by prayer and supplication and thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God. Give it to God. Whether it's good, whether it's hard, give it to God. Leave it at the throne. And then, one of the verses that has helped me so much in difficult times, the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. In other words, give it to God. Be happy. You can be joyful no matter what it is, because if you lay it at the throne, don't pick it back up. Let Him give you the peace that passes all understanding. Now, as I fought cancer and went through difficult trials at times, God would give peace that I can't understand enough to even explain to you. I don't know how He did it. I don't know why He did it. I just know that God can do it, and He promises to do that if you'll lay it at the throne. Those verses work together. Verse 8, I even left out because it's a lot longer. But what do you think on? Those things that are just, pure, lovely, good report, virtue, if there be any praise, think on those things. Keep your mind occupied with Christ. In the beginning of the chapter, he starts off with, there was an argument between a couple of people. In verse 2 it says, I beseech Eodias and Syntyche that they be in the same mind in the Lord. Now I always thought it would be cool if my name was in the Bible. And I guess it could have been named a Bible character, but I always, it'd be kind of cool if there was a Melvin Barth in the Bible. Well, no, Mel. I'd go with Mel, yeah. But here's two people that got their names mentioned in the Bible, and we have been reading about them for years and years and years, but not in a good way. He said, I beseech Eodias and Syntyche that they be in the same mind in the Lord. In other words, they weren't getting along. There was he doesn't say what it is. He doesn't say who was right, who was wrong. He doesn't say this person should win that. He says, be in the same mind of Christ. How do you help yourself when you're in the middle of strife, when you're in the middle of torment? You take the mind of Christ. You take His mind. And once you realize it's in His hands, then you're able to face anything. That's why Paul goes on to say, not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. Now that sounds easy. I mean, we can all say that. As a matter of fact, a lot of times we all do say that. I mean, your cat could have gotten run over. You could have had a horrible time getting your hair done on Sunday morning. The kids could be fighting like cats and dogs. But when you walk into the auditorium and someone says, "How's it going?" "Oh, good. Whatever state I am, I'm content." And that's what we do. We put on a happy face. But that's not what Paul is saying. He's saying whether things are going good, whether things are going bad, whether I have money, whether I have nothing, whether people are happy with me, whether people want to stone me, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. It's not just that I'm putting on a happy face. I'm okay with it because I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. In other words, it's not in my hands. It's not in my hands. It's in God's hands. And God has control over it. And if I can live with that faith in my mind, then I can handle it. The problem is many times we want to take it into our own hands. And that is simply, no, you see, what I did caused this situation. And so I deserve to be here. And so I really need to kick myself a little bit more. Okay, it's one thing to deal with sin. It's another thing to understand that you are where you are because that's where God has you. Does God cause you to sin? No, but God never wastes a circumstance. Does God cause the market to fall and you to lose money? No, but that's where God has you right now. And some of that can be just to see how you react, just to see where you're going to turn. I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. A lot of times we use that for courageous things. I can fight Goliath because God strengthens me. Yes, you can. But you can also fight a deadly disease. Now, you can't do it yourself. You're not going to get out a slingshot. You're not going to find anything that you can muster up and say, if I just really struggle hard, I can make this cancer go away. No, it doesn't. It doesn't work that way. But if I realize, you know what? God knows where I am. God knows what's going on. And he can take care of anything, no matter who or no matter what it is or who it is that's coming after you. I remember, I think it was my dad that said it the first time I went through cancer. Here I had stage 4 cancer. They told me that I was probably going to die. It was a difficult time, obviously, and it was an unnerving time for us. But I can remember, I think it was my dad that said, you know what, Mel, God is not up on his throne with his head in his hands going, oh no, Mel has cancer. What are we going to do? No, from the beginning of time, God knew exactly where I was going to be. He knew exactly what I was going to face, and he knew exactly what was going to happen. My job wasn't to figure it out. My job was to let him do what he's going to do, to turn it over to him, to lay it at the throne. And then finally, verse 19 says, my God shall supply all your needs according to his riches in glory by Christ Jesus. God has a lot of riches. God has a lot of glory. God has a lot of power. And it's all there for you if you will turn it over to him, and you will continually leave what you have at the throne before him in prosperity, in difficult times. This all makes me think of the mission field, and it's so neat to be able to be with a missionary who is living by faith. Sometimes he's not even sure where the next payment is going to come from, and God supplies time after time after time. We went through 5 years of that while we were on the road in evangelism. I remember my parents being worried. You're going into evangelism as an assistant evangelist. Evangelists starve on their own, let alone an assistant evangelist who goes out and, unlike the story that I told in the beginning about the guy who made $95,000 a year. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. We were in churches that were less than 100, probably almost half the time we were in small churches of 150 or less with 2 families in evangelism. And I remember the first 6 weeks as we went out, we would think, how is the Lord going to do this? Can you do this, Lord? I mean, we didn't even get a bunch of offerings. We got one offering. We got a Thursday night love offering. The evangelist got Sunday night, Sunday morning, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and Friday. I need to talk to him about that. That wasn't really fair. But that's the way we set it up. I mean, the church was going to have an evangelist anyway, but we wanted to be there and be a blessing to the church. And if they just gave us the Thursday night love offering, that's all that we would ask. And it was so neat how God would work it out every single time. God would bring in just what we needed. God would bring in sometimes a little extra if he had something special planned for us. After about 6 weeks of seeing God supply in sometimes tiny churches, we got to the place where I'd go into a church that would be really small, and instead of going, I wonder if God's going to do it this week, you'd kind of get this little cocky smirk and say, all right, Lord, let's see how you're going to do it this time. Because you knew he was going to do it, and he always did it. Because my God shall supply your needs according to his riches in Christ Jesus. Living by faith. Mission trip is a great opportunity to see that in action.